Thank you, Professor Din. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the second year I was invited in the framework of the common seminar SEPS and Fudan. And it's very good to be back. Thank you very much. I wanted to deal with these issues. There's a quest for new leadership. Bernard Hoekman and also colleague Chen Bing has talked about it. I want to delve a little deeper in the following way. But leadership has a number of requirements. You cannot just say, let's have leadership and sit in a room and then produce it. It also has to be accepted by others, so that's what I will talk about a bit. So what was long taken for granted is no longer. There is a risk that the World Trade System will be seriously eroded. And the US has, whatever it still does, it certainly has abdicated its WTO leadership, and it's now up to others. And I will argue it's up to China and the EU. But there are three minimum conditions, maybe more. One is size. The other is the capacity to build alliances with like-minded partners. And the third is, if you build a collective or public good worldwide, you have to set the example yourself with incentives that the others will like. To put it differently, if you want to be a leader in the World Trade System, you need followers. Otherwise it doesn't work. So size is easy. This graph quickly gives you the size. And I've on purpose added Japan and in the services case India just to give you a clue how big the other three are. As for services, for goods is even more clear. You can enrich it, you can write a beautiful paper on this size issue, you can bring FDI stocks in. Although if you look at three different sources, you get three different figures. For FDI stocks, so you have to be a bit careful. And then you also have to look at the demands for leadership. Many of the smaller countries will look at what are their most important trading partners. And it so happens that way over 130 countries have China, EU and US as the top three. So that's also very much a reason from their point of view. Building alliances already is slightly harder. It used to be the Quad for the old people in the room, like me. Until 1995, the Quad was running informally, the GET system. And there was a form of leadership, on socks, softy. Never explicitly outspoken. The OECD Trade Committee also did a lot of work in the background, but all the people who were involved knew that. That's all gone. So you have, at the moment you have, apart from Trump, of course, Mr. T, we should say, Mr. T, we have no big discord on the main issues as the WTO stands, but you have a lot of discord on things that how it could be improved. Read Bernard's paper. We have plurilaterals, but China is only in one of them and is knocking on the door of the other three, but doesn't really want to enter so far. The US is now a unilateral disruptor, although on the 301 case, they leave the door open for solutions. So it's China and the EU have to build an effective alliance to preserve, to protect the WTO, and better still, to extend and improve it. But that can only work when partners no longer see the WTO as a given and then you can do what you like. No, you have to embrace the WTO and say, what can I do to make the WTO more robust and withstand attacks such as unilateralism. The third point is effective openness. And there's a whole lot of things here saying what effective openness means, but the main point is that others must recognize that you are open. You cannot declare that yourself. So world tradership begins at home, and that's a very important issue. So if China and the EU will assume leadership, we have all the right conditions here. What is perhaps not enough emphasized in China is that the US is more important to China in trade issues than the US is, and it has much more intense relationships. And I think there is a natural tendency to look first at the US here because it's a Pacific power and we are not. But it doesn't mean that in trade it's the case. And in trade and IPR and FDI, this is certainly, so the bilateral relationship could certainly be a basis to build on. It would, however, require a rethink of their strategies. So China would, rather than take the WTO as a given, would have to become a policy entrepreneur, would have to build alliances, and this time outside the APEC framework, but with TPP-11. So it would have to, the EU would have to see China as a co-leader and try to do things together, rather than talk about bilateral relations only. And we should, as a strong sign of credibility of this leadership, we should be able to conclude the CAI, the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, and the FTA between the EU and China that President Xi proposed in 2014, but which was never picked up so far, in a very open fashion, so that the net effect would be positive externalities and credibility for a number of MFN issues, even in a bilateral agreement. But there is a third issue. Is the socialist market economy with Chinese characteristics compatible with that leadership? And this is an issue for 50 years. This is not an issue this year. But this year it has come to a head, late last year and this year. And it's the last bullet point that I want to call your attention to, because I think either in China there is an understandable automatic defensive reaction to these things in the EU, US and Japan, because all three have this problem, and other countries as well. Or it's simply not analyzed seriously enough. And I would like to call your attention to what the rest of the world does, even if some specialists in China, of course, know very well. So this debate is simmering, and it's systemic. Not systematic, it's systemic. It's about the system. And Mr. T likes to rock the boat, but for the first time it's no longer on steel, aluminium, and here and there a quick fix. The last weekend, he and Lighthizer linked the short-run, quick-fix type of trade conflict with the systemic issue in the 301 case that was reported on 22 March. And that's really very much fundamental and very much more complicated. The EU wrote a huge paper in December on China's system, not on here and there a policy measure of China, because that you can do for it. So, and I want to try, but I have only 10 minutes, to give you some idea. There is a paper here, and I will not explain this slide because then I surpass my 10 minutes. So you can read that page at your leisure. It summarizes all the formal sources of this debate in one page. So China now faces the dilemma of sticking with its highly interventionist and managed economy, which it has a right of doing, or recognizing the fundamental incompatibility with market-driven yet responsible globalization. If it does the first bullet, it will, and that's different from the past, incur quickly decreasing tolerance from leading trading partners. In impolite terms, they are fed up. If it does the second, it would imply deep reforms at home, but for which there is a solution. I'll mention that in a minute. And ample scope for the effective leadership that I've been proposing in the earlier slides. The EU's favor is to do what China itself wants to do. That's the only sensible approach. China must make its choices itself, of course. But it did that in November 2013 with the 60 reforms. I don't know whether you have actually read these 60 reforms. I strongly recommend that you read these reforms. The EU would love it, and what is the fun of it, it would be very good for China, because that is what China itself said in November 2013. Thank you very much.